Hello there, this is GenXPCGamerGuy, and welcome to my video about building a custom gaming desktop computer for a friend, part 1. Alright, I've assembled the parts for my friend's new gaming machine. The case, the motherboard, a Maximus 12 Hero with Wi-Fi, don't know if he's going to use it. The EVGA 850 G2 power supply. Cables for that power supply are in a box down below. We'll be using an Intel i9 10th generation chip with 10 cores. I am going to either cool it with a single fan water cooler or this fan here. We're going to have 3 M.2 NVMe interface internal solid state drives, basically memory chips. We are going to start with the fastest for the Windows partition, and then 2 for D and E partitions for storage or game files. The RAM, we are going to do 4 8GB Ripjaws. Not sure how fast they are, but we can talk about that later. Finally, the video cards that I'm going to put in here are a couple spares that I have. They're still really good cards. The cards are GTX 1070s by EVGA. We're going to use a SLI bridge between the two. Hopefully that's going to work. If that's not the right one, then I have a couple others. And finally, back there is a EVGA PowerLink for better wire management for a graphics card in case we need it. So this is where we're going to start. I will first start probably working on the case. So that's it for the moment. I will unpack the case and return right back. Alright, we're going to clean up before we unpack the case. Gotta make room. And this is fast forwarded. This won't last forever, but it's easier this way than watching all the details in regular motion. So nothing surprising here. Unpack it. Get it out if you can. Save the packaging, because once the computer's done, I'll ship it with the original box. Or transport it with the original box. Okay, take off the glass case. Kind of like that. Looking around for loose things. Gonna look at the box real quick. Now, I don't want the case to scratch the surface of the table. Put down a little bit of cloth. Take off the back. Take a look around. There's the equipment that came with the case. Just looking for any surprises in the instructions. Doesn't look like any. Checking to see how the wires are connected throughout the case. Opening some of the bags just to examine what's in them. Mostly looking for the screws. So now this is the second attempt at installing the power supply. I had to get a little shoe polish case because the power supply doesn't align exactly when you hold the case like that. And so that little depth of that shoe polish case was just enough. I tried a couple objects in there and it was too high usually. And I love the Dremel screwdriver. But it doesn't always tighten, or the bit is a bit small. I'll finish the job with, I was looking for another bit. I'll finish the job myself. So I always put the power supply in just to figure out how much room I have for cables. And there we go. we'll take out the cell phone and show a little bit of detail, and I'll try to display it to the side here. Here we go. So power supply, there, you know, room for drives, but there isn't much room between the power supply back and the drives. The case is pretty roomy inside. Comes with 2 fans there. Standard stuff. Alright, now we'll move on to the next step, and we'll put the case back down. We'll grab the motherboard. Here we go. Check it out. Manual, disk CD with drivers and tools. Looking at all the parts here. Looking at weird stuff here. Alright. So take the motherboard out, put it on some plastic. Make sure, get rid of any wrapping that was on it. And we'll put it in to see how the holes line up. Check where all the wires are for the case. And now we'll look at close-up. Oop, that's a blurry picture, sorry about that. Lots of ports in the back, just looking where the holes approximate. Pretty easy standard stuff here. I'm not gonna screw down the case, the motherboard into the case first. It's just easier to work with the motherboard and install a few items before we finally screw it down. What I noticed about this motherboard is the SSDs have covers. There's 3 M.2 slots. You got to take the cover off of all 3 of them. I just got to figure out which one's number 1, 2, and 3. And that's all I was looking at here, is trying to figure out the order of the M.2 slots, because it does matter. Sometimes the motherboards disable the SATA slots to when you put a M.2 in. So I finally figured out which cases to take out. That little cover is on top of the other cover. So that's slot 1 and 2. And there you go. So now we'll put the the solid state drives in. Yeah, it's a good thing we're speeding this up. This takes forever. Just getting the drives ready. They look like a memory stick. They are a memory stick. They just instead of going lengthwise, they plug in at the end. Here we go. Got all 3 open. This is the main one, the smallest, but it's the fastest one, so it goes in slot 1. I'm just looking to see if there's any screws to tap it down that came with the case, but I doubt it. I bought kind of screws, and so we'll put the 3rd one in. 3 separate places. Now you've got to find the right kind of screws to screw them in. Put the first one in. I put the second one in. They seem to be, well, second one's still working on it. Yeah, I have a tendency to drop screws. They're tiny. So tiny. And sometimes you have to install these riser screws, and that's what I'm doing there. I have to get a riser screw. Put that in there first. Yep. Yep. Put that riser screw in. That way it's nice and level. There. nice and level when we put the final screw in. And then what I noticed is the #1 slot actually needs a riser. So I have to take out that again and find another riser for that #1 slot. So now I can put the #1 slot in, they'll be even, #1 and #2 will be even. And I can put the covers back over them. This is very difficult to do with a motherboard if the motherboard's in the case. It's just one of these things you should do ahead of time, especially with this type of motherboard. It's a little trick to this because you got to see underneath where the screw lines up with the hole. And I didn't get it quite right the first time, but eventually I get it. Yeah, I didn't get it right there, so. Yeah, I'll get it. There we go. And now the bottom of the two covers, the one covers the other one, and this is the lower one. By installing the second SSD, I lost one of the cover screw holes, so that it was taken up. Therefore, instead of 4 screws, I only need 3. It is not a big deal. And the covers are to protect the SSDs from direct heat from the video cards. Alright, now the final case should be next. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, imagine the motherboard being in there and you had to work on the SSDs. You got to take off almost everything around it, and especially over these kinds of slots, you'll put the video cards. So that's why that was first. And just taking a look at the main processor. Let's just put away all the leftovers. Cleaning up a little bit, and then we'll start the next step. Alright. We'll move onwards in a second here. So there we go, just making sure everything's a little better organized. Yeah, scissors can be dangerous. So there's the motherboard so far. And that, we'll move on to the next step in a second. Alright, we need to install the motherboard speaker. It's pretty simple. Just put it in the jumpers, and there we go. Now, install the Intel processor. The trick with this is you got to make sure it lines up properly. And generally it's foolproof, but you do really got to be careful. It looks obvious, seems to fit, like you test to make sure it's snug. Double check the book, make sure which way it should be aligned. And it looks good. Now you take this little piece of plastic off that covered, would have popped up on its own, but it's just something you do. So clean up. Now we try to look at the CPU fan now that the CPU is in place. We open the box, grab the main part of the fan so we get a good idea how much of the motherboard it's going to hover over. So it looks like it's going to hover over the memory. So that's the next step. Put in the memory after cleaning up a little bit, looking at how the fan would work here. I already know it's going to overlap the memory. Let's put away the fan, clean up a little bit, and install the memory. So there are 4 8 gig cards. Pretty easy to install. It can only go one way and snap in place. You hear the noise or feel it, you're done. So there's number 3. And here's number 4. Pretty simple. Thumbs up, yeah. Now, we're going to install the motherboard into the case. We've done pretty much the most tedious stuff that would have been harder had the motherboard already been in the case. So this part is going to take a while, so I fast forwarded this significantly. In this case, there's 3 rows of 3 screws, and you got to make sure you get the right screws. And 1 or 2 of them will probably be very hard to get at. I'll show the end result with a close-up when this task is done. It should line up perfectly. I mean, most modern cases, yeah, already have the common motherboard holes in place. Now, the case would come with extra screws or extra risers so that in case you have a non-standard motherboard, you just put the screws, the risers on the case and screw in the motherboard. In this case, I got to remove one of these PCI slot just to get at one of the screws. It's a little tougher. There we go. All right, now the last couple screws. It sounds like somebody was cutting the grass out there while I was making this video. Yep. We're securing the motherboard. Maybe there's a final screw here. This takes a while, so I don't remember exactly. There we go. Yeah, some light. Ah, needed light. There we go. Now I'm going to show a close-up of some of the motherboard to show you how it lines up. So those screws look good. Processor in place. So some loose wires from the case itself. I'm going to have to secure those. But overall, looks fine. Now we're going to... Those loose wires are now going to put it attached to the motherboard. There are like USB wire. There's the reset button, the power button, the hard drive light. Not difficult, but now that the motherboard's in the case, I've got big hands, so it takes a little bit of effort for me to do it. And some light. Need some extra light. And we should show this up close. Alright, let's look at the case here. Next step is installing the CPU fan. And I had to change brands, so let me show you the brand I got. So it's a different style, and I like the way this one plugs into the motherboard from the back. So there's a plate for the back that you secure like so, and then you have the screws on top. They're riser screws. You're going to set the fan on top of these 4 screws. This is much easier than the other way. The other way seemed to have no room. You seem to have to line up the fan, you know, specifically to those holes. If you didn't get one of them right, it didn't go all the way down into the bottom of the motherboard. So it looks, this is easier and looks like to be a better model anyways. Not that I'm not recommending the other one, it's just it's not my style. So this is going to be easier to install. Yeah, it goes in like that. Take a look at it. I separated the fan from the rest of it. It's easy to reattach the fan. So I'm attaching the fan part to the CPU fan on the board. There's other slots as well in case you wanted a water cooler one, but this case isn't large enough for a water cooler. I've tried. You have to get like a full case. Somebody may be able to do it, but I don't want to do it. So here's a close-up. CPU fan. There's the processor. There's the 4 riser screws. Here we go. Gotta put some there we go. Screwing it in. Shouldn't take too long. I do like the Dremel screwdriver, but sometimes you just want to feel for it, so doing it by hand in this case. So it looks good. Yeah. Pretty easy. And you just snap the fan back on. Like so. Be careful around this type of fan. The blades, the cooling blades are very sharp, and I'm not going to show it in this video, but maybe in a blooper video that I cut myself pretty bad working around that. So now we're going to install one of the graphics card. We're not going to install both because I want to get the first boot done and install Windows and patch it and everything else first. This is really part 1 up to first boot. Second part will be installing Windows and patches and various things to make sure the machine is running. And I think there'll be a part 3 where I install the rest of the equipment because I'm not attaching the case fans in this case. That's a sort of a pun. I'm gonna wait till later because I'm not putting the glass face on this yet. Yeah, I was trying to remove it here because I lost the screw down below, and that happens a lot. So I got the screw back. I want to screw down that video card. So the SSD covers underneath make it a little more difficult to remove the card once it's in, but I don't see a reason to remove it that often. So there we go. That's what it looks like. Again, there's the back. I'm still trying. I must have lost another screw. It happens. It's very frustrating. Probably hear it. Make sure that cart is down good. There we go. Clean up a little bit. Making room for the next step, which will be installing the power cable. We're going to install the power cables for like the video card, the motherboard. I think that's it for now. And there might be a CPU, I'm sorry, a case power requirement. Let's get started on the power cords, but that's how it is looking so far. Here we go, power cords. So the ones I need are down below there, the bottom of the screen. Making sure this has some nice convenient holes. The case does right there. So I want to push through some of the cables. There's a power for the case right there. So I was checking that out. And now I'm verifying this is the CPU power cable. Pushing that through. One of the CPU cables, there's two. So that's the main one. So there it is, it's ready to go. I want to look and see what the situation is near the power supply, how much room I've got. I'm actually going to show you. If I can get it to work. There we go. So there's not a lot of room to work with, because to the left there, more to the bottom of the screen, there is room for hard drives, and I'm not really going to need it. Still need the phone for light, and I'm having trouble because look at my hands had a difficult time working in there. Still gonna try again. Nope, I'm gonna take out the hard drive enclave. So there's screws on within the case, and there's screws on the side of the case that need to come out. I'm making myself more room. There, lots of room now. So there are a lot more wires to install. The other CPU wire, power cable I should say. I was double checking where the CPU power was. I had the instructions out there. And I need some light. Making sure I got the right end of the power cable. I've done that in the past. Wrong end. Have to redo it all. Okay, same thing. Push it through. Make sure it doesn't interfere with the cooling fan. we go. Push that through. Actually, it needs two. This is the first motherboard I've seen that needs two CPU power cables on the top there. Oh, it's a 6 slot and a 4 slot. And now I'm doing the video card ones, and I'm starting at the power supply first because it's closer to the top there, and I'm just pushing that through to see how much room we've got. These are the video card ones. And we're going to do this for the first boot test, so neatness doesn't count in this case. Just that we don't hit that cooling fan. So everything looks good. That's more power requirements. That's probably the lighting on the fan. That's for the CPU right there. Make sure that's all powered up. Oh, not the CPU, the case. All right. That should be all the power we need at the moment for first boot. Now we can add the monitor, the keyboard, the mouse, and the power cord. And see what happens during first boot. You never know. Spare monitor. Connected into power, connected into the video card. Monitor still works, that's good. I've got, that looks like the mouse. And there's the keyboard. There's the power cord into this case, or power supply. And here we go. First boot is next. So I'm just verifying the power supply switch is on first. Now if we installed all the wires correctly, we should be able to, yep, everything is there. I have assembled everything before and tried first boot and then had to undo a lot of it. So, hey, the video card flashed there briefly for a second. There, it's back on. Still nothing. I don't hear anything. First boot. This is the scary part. Don't panic. Wait. Just wait. Yeah, and it went out. You can get disheartened at this point, and there it's back. I think the motherboard is just figuring out what it's attached to it. It's never been powered before by me. So, and I'm just paranoid, so I'm going to check that the monitor's still working there. And look, the video card kit is back on. And, yeah, paranoia. Oh, beep! We have a beep. Is that a good beep or a bad beep? You never know at this point. Hey, there we go. It actually booted. Yeah, and thumbs up. So far so good. It looks like the 3 SSD drives are there in the wrong. No, it says 212223. Yes. Looks like it found them. Yes, thumbs up. So this is up till first boot. We'll go into the BIOS, make sure everything's good. And we'll consider this video done because this is just the beginning, part 1. Thanks for watching my video. Onwards to part 2.